So Bob, go for it.
Yes, I'm Bob Newholm, I think most of you know me, and I'm also on the board of directors of Lakeland Telecom. And when Chuck and I talked about this, I thought it was a great idea to have this. I think probably the telephone company is the only continuous running business for the last 100 years in the town of Luck. They're doing the same thing. Ed might be able to correct me on that, but I can't think of anything. So it's good that we have a lot of people and members of the society that have had a long time relationship with the telephone company. And I'd like to introduce Sherry Thorsbach, who has been, she works currently works for Lakeland, and brought all the items for display tonight. And if you could give us a introduction.
Hi everyone, I'm Sherry Horsbach and I work for Lakeland Communications. I'm the office manager there and I also do the marketing. And like Bob said, I did bring a bunch of memorabilia and so forth back there on the table. We've got a lot of directories and some fun stuff just to look through and see who was, what their telephone number was way back in 1930s or 20s or whatever it may be. I also brought with a booklet that we did last year for the telephone company on our 100-year anniversary. So it is everything about the telephone company for 100 years. And I've got some copies back there on the table. So everybody, please take one when you leave. And it does go through all of our history as Luck Telephone, but then through our merger and so forth now to be Lakeland Communications. Did you want to introduce others first, or do you want me to start? Or?
No, you go ahead.
Okay,
I
well then
forgot about
anybody can
introducing them.
well, Silpa here is, Silpa Paulson is here as an operator. I'm not sure what your...
A telephone operator.
I think, I was trying to remember, but I think I graduated from high school in 41, so it had to be 41, 42.
Okay.
I don't know.
Silpa, you told me you started in the company.
No. And then we have Wayne Shirley and Warren Kirk also, and they're going to be adding some items here if I forget anything. Just to get started here, the telephone company was organized back in 1908. And what happened was the Farmers Equity in Atlas, there was a lot of the business owners there were into the feed business, and they needed to be able to get a hold of customers and so forth. So then they wanted to further their business. They didn't care about making a profit at that time, but they wanted to further their business. So then they came to Luck seeking, others to get together with them and try to make this telephone company so that they'd have communication to everyone they needed. At the time they decided this, it was back in 1908, and the poles were too expensive to buy. So each member was required to cut poles, and they had to be from white tamarack or white oak. They were paid 50 cents for 22-foot poles and 60 cents for 25-foot poles. And they couldn't be less than 5 inches wide at the top, and they had to be peeled and delivered. So that wasn't a lot of money now when you think of it today. 1/2 or $12.50 of the stockholders' share could be paid in poles. And then 1/2 mile of line was built for each share of stock. So that kind of tells you, for each share of stock, the line would only go a 1/2 mile. So it depended on how many shares of stock they bought and so forth to how far that they were going to be going with the line. They had an individual, his name was J.T. Addington, and he canvassed the country from Atlas to Trade River to Luck, and he would find people that would like to purchase these shares and also be able to cut these poles. And so that's how the original telephone company started, was just by going door to door, seeing who wanted telephone and so forth. And then in Luck, they were gracious enough, they furnished the company with a room for the central office. And then this was, I thought, kind of interesting. An individual had gone to the board and they offered to give a room and board to the operators if they would sell cigars and candy. But they rejected it. So they did not do that. A building owned by Carl Peterson was purchased, and the land that the telephone company still sits on today is where the original building was, and that's still Luck Telephone Company. So after 100 years, it still resides in the same place. Back then, the rates was $1 a month for resident rate and $1.50 a month for a business rate. And dividends were paid out every 3 months for the shareholders. So they had something to look forward to every 3 months. And building of the lines. At that time, Anton Peterson served the switchboard and he cared for the Luck vicinity. And then Jack Casperson worked on the country lines and he traveled by horse and buggy. The linemen were paid $2 a day for an experienced lineman and $1.85 for inexperienced, $3 for a man with his horse, and $3.50 if he had to stop in Luck and required room and board. Renters at the time were required to build their own line. They would not help them. The telephone operators, the very first operator was Myrtle Smith from Cushing, and she was paid $25 a month. The operators were on 6-month time frames and then were paid $33 a month. And in 1910, Maud Swanson was hired and stayed on as an operator until the company went to dial phones. There was a 3-minute time limit on all calls. Now, can you think about that now with teenagers or whatever? 3 minutes, it wouldn't work today, I don't think. 1914, party lines could be no more than 12 to 15 subscribers on a line, and they had brought that down. And then in 1915, the first private line was to Martin Yeedy, and what is it? Ide, okay, YDE, and Dr. Funey's dental office. And then at that year also, there was water installed to the company so that the company had water. And in 1920, the telephone rates were $2 per month for party lines, and the lineman's salary was up to $160 a month. In 1924, Mr. Martinson was a lineman and was granted a 2-week vacation because he didn't get any time off for his wedding, so they thought he should have a couple weeks. And in 1925, Lester Peterson took over for Mr. Martinson. 1927, a new switchboard was installed. And then in 1935, when the bills were over $9 and they had not been paid, there was an assignment put on their cream check. So they would always make sure that their bill was paid. 1937 was a consolidation of the Bone Lake and the Equity Telephone Companies. In 1938, the Equity Telephone Company purchased the Frederick Exchange. So at one time, also owned the Frederick Exchange for telephone. And at that time, they also changed their name to Luck Telephone Company. And then I thought it was interesting, one thing I found was Saturday, October 22nd, 1938, and this was in our booklet, it said, it was long to be remembered as disaster struck all the pole lines going east and west. Some 18 inches of very wet, heavy snow had fallen during the night, coating every wire, crossarm, and pole. A brisk wind toppled the heavy poles onto the highways, leaving a mass of broken poles and wires. Snowplows became entangled in the wires. Every available man was hired to pull poles and the wire off the highways. It took 2 months to get the whole plant in working order again. In the 1950s, buried cable was placed to East Luck. And then at that point, Warren Kirk also replaced Lester Peterson as a lineman. In 1959, the dial tone system was built, and in 1960, expanded dial service throughout the exchange. Now the new central office was in Luck, and the old one was moved to Cushing. And we do have some pictures over there of them moving the actual building that was moved from Luck to Cushing at that time. And at that time also the garage addition was put onto the Luck building. In 1970, that was when we did buried cable to all areas and also one-party service. That kind of goes with the older stuff. I have them in 1990, and this is getting a little bit newer. That's when we began cellular service. And if you notice some of the phones that I brought, we started with a bag phone, a great big bag phone. And I can remember selling the very first bag phone to the very first customer at Luck Telephone. And it was so, unbelievable that somebody could talk from their car and have telephone service. We could barely believe it at the office. So we were in awe of those that could come in and buy and be able to be talking and find other people to talk to on these cellular phones, and how things have changed now, because you go from a big bag phone, then it came down to a more of a longer phone, but it was called a portable phone, and we thought that was really something. And I can remember the first person, in fact it was Gus Johansson, that bought one of those, and you'd have this big thing that you would be taking around, with your as your phone. And now you've got them down to, I'm sure some of you have one in your pocket, and you don't know when someone's carrying a phone, when they're not. So the cellular service has really, really changed. And then in 1992, the Luck Telephone became instrumental in helping the Luck Fire Department and Luck Medical Clinic secure REA loans. In 1995, they were a part of a consolidation group consortium that purchased Vision Communications. And then in 1995, we offered local internet access. And then also in 1997, we merged, in which we are now the Lakeland Communications. Some of the things that have changed, and I'll just make a quick note of this, is I brought along some wire that we used to put into the ground many, many years back. It's lead wire, and we're going from lead way back then, and now we're putting in glass fibers, which is your fiber optic cable. And it's just so much different how much we would put the lead in, and it wouldn't cover that many people, and now you put a fiber cable in, and you can get like a 48 cable. You're going to get, there's 48 fibers in there, and it can just get to a massive amount of people. So it's just changed. The technology and so forth has come so far in the past 100 years, even in the past 20 years, it has really, really come a long ways.
Did Warren take the lid out?
I don't know. Now I'll let them see if they've got something to add. I was going to mention one thing, I don't know if Silpa has this, but in these little booklets that we had, there was a couple operators that were interviewed, and they talked about how there was, Ladies' Day or Busy Bee Day or something, and how they would just call the operator and tell her that everybody's going to be gone today, so then she would take all their messages. And they said that was the very first voicemail, is the operator would take their voice messages and know when somebody was gone. Or if they were going to be at the house and needed someone to, know that the kids were home alone or whatever, they'd call the operator and let her know that the kids were at home alone. And so they actually had their own babysitter, voicemail, message taker, everything they wanted. So, if you want to add to that.
Well, of course, I remember a lot of things that happened. We had two boards. They were each about that wide. And I first started out, after I was trained in, I worked at night from 7:30 Friday night until Monday morning at 7:30, I believe. And of course, we had a cot that we would roll out, open up, and set beside the board, and put our night bell on. And there were a lot of interesting calls, of course, late at night. Some you couldn't hardly understand. But it was pretty interesting. There weren't a lot of calls, but there were some emergency things. I think the one thing that I remember a lot of is storms. When the storms would come, Maud and Lester always told us, don't plug in if it's a lot of lightning. Well, of course, the lightning would drop all the drops. So, like on the 23F line, you knew the storm was out in Bone Lake. And but I can remember that one night it was really bad. And I had gotten away from the board, pulled the plug and gotten away from the board because Lester always said, be careful. But anyway, you could pretty much tell when somebody was trying to call. It wasn't just the electricity that was dropping the cards, the drops. But it was somebody that was really trying to call. And I remember this one time I plugged in to, it was a bone Lakeland. And it was a really bad storm, but I could tell they were really, it was urgent. They needed to get, and I just plugged my plug back into the board and bang. It really got bad. And Lester, it just blew me. And Lester came over, and I remember he said, you know, you were really lucky. He said that thing came within, and I can't remember whether he said 30 feet, maybe you can remember, Warren, can you remember that?
No,
No?
that was before my days.
It was either 30 or 300 feet within the telephone company that it blew out the line completely out, a big cable or whatever.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I remember Lester talking about it, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And he told me, he said, you know, if that had come all the way in, you'd have been killed. So, it was imperative, you know, that we were careful about that, but, you know, if you never knew, this person probably had a fire, and you didn't want to be responsible for not answering a call. So, there were instances that were kind of scary. And of course, at night, I wasn't too fond of staying alone there, but we locked up everything, but sometimes like Sunday afternoons, we'd have some visitors from Round Lake, and I can remember this one stood and put his arm around me while I was sitting at the switchboard, and I thought, how am I going to get rid of this guy? And, you know, there you sit, I mean, you're tired, you can't leave that place. Well, there were a lot of things that went on, and of course, like, yeah.
My Aunt Asta was an operator for many years, and she didn't like to stay alone at night, so I stayed there.
What did you?
I was 9 or 10 years old, and what I would have done, I don't know. She wasn't alone anymore.
It was pretty scary to stay alone at night, but I did it for quite a long time. I eventually did work up to, I was chief operator when I finally left there. And I think I was chief for about 2.5 years. And at that point, I got a whole 67.5 cents an hour. But I always enjoyed it. It was a fun place to work. Interesting, you know. And, but Maud she was a good trainer. And there were several. Dora Peterson, I don't know if any of you remember her. She worked, and Esther did too, I think, the sisters. And Vivian Peterson, she worked for a while. She used to be Scout, Vivian Scout, with Mrs. Early. And Elin Larson, she worked too. And Gertrude Peterson, she worked at night for quite a long time before when she quit, then I took her shift.
When was the last operator? What year or what?
59.
It was 59.
59?
59.
I heard stuff that was quite interesting when there was a fire. Can you explain what you did then? Pulling, I think you heard something about you had to pull all the plugs for the fire department.
Yeah, we did, and it was up to us to ring the siren. And I was always kind of scared doing that too, because you pull your button and wait until it got to the peak and then let it go down. You know, probably ringing six times.
So you had to volunteer for the firemen that were,
Yeah,
that
I
had
can't
close
just remember how we did that, but it seemed like, do you remember that, Warren?
Oh, I think we just heard the siren.
Just heard the siren, that's what I was notified.
When I first got on the fire department, you know, we just did,
Yeah.
I guess when I got on the fire department, I was usually on pretty good side of the telephone operators, they'd probably make sure that I got there.
Yeah. And of course, we had, beside that, we had a lot of, like we talked about before, you know, all the messages that went over, and like Maud would, she was home, she'd call and she'd say, "Get me Rose, please." And, would you call Jake? Different ones would call in. "I'm gonna be in Elsie's for a while, will you call me there if you need, if I get a call?" And that sort of thing went on quite a bit. So it was interesting.
That was called for.
Yeah, right, yeah.
I remember my mother would answer the phone or call somebody and she'd always say, "Ellen, I'm talking to Eloise now." She always said somebody that she knew was listening in on the party line. And it was always
Oh, yeah.
Ellen or Helen, I don't remember which.
And then, of course, the different rings, like 321 was 3 long and a short. 121 was a short and a long and a short. That's the way, you know, that way. So, but of course, there'd be 8, 10, 12 people on a party line, and sometimes people would stand there and talk and talk and talk. Once in a while, we did have to ask them to, if there was something that was really urgent, we did have to ask them if they would please hang up for a while. But, like I said, it was very interesting.
I can never figure with the 3 longs and
And a short.
a short or something, you know, with everybody's own definition of what a long and a short is, that had to be confusing as.
Well, I get pretty used to that, of course. Yeah. And I had one customer that he was a businessman. He thought he was the only one that should use the telephone. He'd call and he'd be so-and-so. I said, "It's busy." And he didn't even hang up before he'd call me again. And it went on and on and on until there were times I'd like to have told him, you know, just give it a minute in between your calls, please. But he didn't. It was interesting.
Tell me about the change to the dial. How did that work with you then?
Well, I was that's after my time,
Okay.
yeah. Because I think I must have left there about 1944 or 45, if I'm not mistaken.
We made the cut one night at about like 10 o'clock at night, I suppose it was, and just cut all the wires, just cut the old switchboard off and wired up the new dial system. And all new lines had been built and all that kind of stuff, so it was just, they were all done work, just like that.
Was it a kind of a celebratory thing or kind of did you realize what a passing of an era it was, that there were no more operators?
Oh yeah, it was happening all over the country. I mean, it was just, the United States government was making 2% loans to anybody that wanted them to convert telephone system to dial service. So it was just a popular thing to do. And everybody wanted it.
Kind of reverse stimulus, huh?
Yeah. Oh yeah, well, of course they kept on that all the way through when we went to one party buried service and stuff. It was all 2% government loans.
Did they use the old lines for a while, or did they, when they went to the dial, did they automatically?
No, we didn't build new lines.
But the underground came later, right?
The underground came after that, right? Yeah.
One thing I do remember too is that for long distance, Frederick was our toll center. And so anybody that wanted to place a long distance call, they would call us, of course, and tell us who they wanted, and then we would place it through the Frederick Telephone Company. And there was none of this like we have nowadays, where you just dial your own number.
So how many people would be on a party line?
Oh, there'd be 10, 12. Yeah.
We had some that were up over 20. Yeah. Just learn to share, that's all.
I think a lot of people enjoy those party lines.
Other people would be rude, you know, if people were talking and they wanted to talk, they would listen in and then they'd slam the receiver and.
I think a lot of people just listen in on calls.
It didn't get any better even when we cut down to where we just had 4 parties. It didn't make any difference because it only takes one person to be,
That's right.
you can't get along with them. They're just impossible.
They wanted to
You know,
know
you
all
can't
the news.
imagine them. I mean, that was the greatest relief. We went to one party, telephones, we wouldn't have to listen to that anymore. Oh,
So when was it that you went to the one party? Is that
in
when?
the 70s, early
In the
70s,
70s.
72 in there sometime. Yeah, I can tell you one time, we always held directors meeting in the back room in the bank. And we were all back there. And we were having bad problems out in Atlas. We had one woman out there that she just never quit. She'd monopolize the line. You know. And we were sitting in their directors meeting talking about this. And somebody was sitting right out in the next room, right out in the main room, talking to Harold Lindgren all alone. It wasn't good. But it was true. Oh, man, she was bad.
Oh, you mean it was the same person that was all talking?
Well, either that or her son or one member of the family or I don't remember who heard it, but oh boy. Yeah. Andrew had to do his best talking about that thing.
Yeah, we had over 800 subscribers when I was there. And I knew every number. But you know what, it's not hard because, like I said, it was either the one F line or the 2F line or whatever, and then the village numbers on the right-hand board, they weren't F lines, they were just plain numbers. But the country lines were all F lines. And,
Does F line standing for?
Careful,
Farm property.
Yeah.
23F221.
Oh.
Everybody that lived out in the country then was a farmer. Practically.
Okay.
I mean, they all considered themselves farmers anyway.
Yeah,
There was very few people that lived out in Golden Lake that back in the 40s that didn't consider themselves a
So
farmer.
that's where the F
Yeah.
came from. Okay.
Yeah. Farmers.
And of course, what was interesting was in 46 was when my dad got bored by a bull, so we went to artificial insemination. And when you rang Central and you just started to say 34, they knew it was Martin Pouch's.
Yeah.
Just automatically.
34F line,
Yep.
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah. Yeah, he got a lot of calls, didn't he?
Yes.
Oh, my.
Warren, did you have to climb those spindly little poles?
Sure. When I started there, that was the first thing Lester taught me was, I think the first thing he taught me how to dig a hole for a pole, and then the next thing was how to climb the pole. Yeah.
Did you ever have a pole go down with you?
No, but it slid down on people.
Well, can you imagine climbing a white oak pole?
Yeah.
Your spurs couldn't be sharp enough.
Some of them there was some old poles, I remember out along 48 out here before they rebuilt the highway. There was some out there, they were old tamarack. And you can't imagine how hard it is. You can't hardly get it, some white people in the middle. No?
Did you dig the hole by hand?
Oh, you bet.
They had a spoon shovel.
I could dig a 4-foot hole with a number 2 shovel.
Oh.
Yep. Yep.
Is that how deep did you
Well,
go?
most old poles were set 4 feet.
4 feet?
Yeah, I could dig that. Yeah.
Anybody hire you for outhouse work?
No, I suppose we dug, well, until 59, we dug everything by hand, and stuff all in. Then after that, when we got that little truck.
Well, they did have the McCullough, the auger.
Yeah, we used that some, but we had to rent that.
Yeah.
But there had to be some places where, I mean, to get down 4 feet, had to be just about like rock, wasn't it?
Well, going east it ain't bad, you ought to try it out where Roger Sandstrom used to live.
Right.
North of Cushing, you get up north of Cushing up there, some, gee, some of that was some hard stuff. especially in the fall of the year.
How long would those poles last?
Well, a lot of them old cedar poles, those original cedar poles, they last a long time.
The tamarack and the oak, probably not as long.
Oh, I don't know, tamarack lasts a long time too. Yeah, but I'm sure those poles that were out there on 48, I'll bet you they were put in there and when they built only telephone
I
company.
think so. And for those that were treated with penta,
Oh, they were hard.
they were so hard.
What about the long distance? You said something had to go up to Frederick. How far could people in Luck call Minneapolis?
Oh, yeah.
And then how'd you keep track of the charges? Did you?
Well, we had tickets we had to write off for each call.
I see. Okay.
And then at the end of the month, why, that was the job I had to do too. Get that all.
800 numbers? Wow.
Huh?
800 numbers or 800 people and
Of course, there weren't a lot of people that called long distance, actually. There were some, of course, but not 800 people.
no. Okay.
Subscribers.
And how far could you call? Could you call to California?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you could.
I don't ever remember calling overseas or anything,
No.
but we did call California. But mainly it was Minneapolis and surrounding area, you know.
Because the 40s there was, people had sons in army camps and things. I would think they
Yeah.
wanted to get a hold of them.
It seemed like the calling, when I called from in the Navy, from Washington, it seemed as kind of leapfrogging across the country to get home from one large station to another. And you could listen to all these operators.
Yeah.
Connecting. Okay.
You'd probably, because you'd end up in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
And then they had direct lines to Frederick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it took quite a while to get a call through.
Oh, sure, because you had to go through several operators. I imagine Minneapolis, Chicago,
Yeah.
who knows? I don't know if it'd be Chicago, New York, or I suppose something like that probably, but I don't have any idea how, but it's like here, we only had, when I started with the telephone company, we only had 3 long distance lines. That's what we had. So you know how much long distance would be.
Yeah.
I mean, it was.
Yeah.
And at that time, while we had butternut dairy here, and they probably almost kept one line busy all day long.
Sure.
With between butternut dairy and Land O'Lakes. Yeah.
When you think about the extremes, 3 long distance lines,
Yeah.
and now you go to the grocery store and 56 out of the 60 people are talking on the phone, or texting, or it's almost gone, in my opinion, too far the other way.
Wow.
Never-
I can't imagine these people can find that much to keep talking. Hey.
I mean, you were watching the face of the person too.
Yeah.
I worked a PBX board for General Mills in Minneapolis for quite a while.
PBX.
Well, it's a company board.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and we had three boards. We were 3 operators. And
That was a private, I mean, it was General Mills
company, yeah,
company.
that was when they were on Second Avenue, I think, downtown. Yeah. And I had Mr. Bullis on my board, who was the chairman of the board, and at that, he was the only one that had a red light that came on. Everybody else was just a light. When that red light came on, you dropped everything. Yes, Mr. Bullis. And he'd get me so-and-so, and he'd hang up. And you, no matter where, if it was New York or overseas or whatever, you got his party on the line, and then you call him back. And your party is ready. Yeah.
You know, I'm so tired now of calling someplace and getting an electronic voice.
Oh, sure.
And when I do get a human being, I say, you know how nice it is to
Yeah.
talk to a real person?
I know what you're saying. That is really
I can't
annoying.
avoid that automatic stuff either.
now the real person is probably over in India someplace.
That's it.
Yeah.
You can't understand it.
But that's not the case with Lakeland Select Telephone. We still have someone answering the phone.
That's true.
One of those shares that they bought back in those days is now 105 shares.
What is the share going for now?
125, 150.
So is that a good investment?
I hope it is. Yeah.
Well, 1909 was when Bull Lake Telephone Company was organized. And that was a wire that came out of Frederick, out to Sheds, was it?
Came out of Grantsburg.
Out of Grantsburg, yeah, but then
It probably came through Frederick and went out to the shed farm.
yeah,
And I could, what I could tell, it wasn't hard to call from what Lester. told
right,
me.
right.
Now, a lot of them don't know where the shed farm is.
Well, we're Bill Poland, north end of Bull Lake.
Right down by the town park.
Right, yeah,
By what?
by the town park.
Oh, sure, I know.
And at that time, they paid $2 a year for each phone, and a motion was to charge 5 cents per call on Sundays. That was defeated though. Then in 1912, 13 phones of the Equity Telephone Company were installed in Frederick business places, with a trunk line running to Luck. And that was kind of the start of Luck owning the Frederick Telephone Company.
They bought it from Wisconsin.
Yep. Then in 1917, the rate for the Bull Lake Telephone Company was raised to $3.46 per phone per year.
Per year?
Yep. And that in that year, the central office girls were given a $5 per month raise. Let's see, what else do I got in here? The telephone office building over there in 1929 was Fred Peterson built. And the new award contract of $2,284.
That's my dad.
Yep.
And they built it just before the banks went broke.
Right.
Yep.
Yep.
What thing, so they had the building.
Did the Luck Bank go broke?
Yep.
Yeah, that.
The Bull Lake Rural
Not that
Telephone.
one up there, but this one was over down here, where the old post office
Where
used
Bob
to be.
Nelson is.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Didn't know that either.
I think that's the one that went broke,
Yeah.
What year was it? What year was it?
like 29.
29.
Oh, okay.
The Bull Lake Rural Telephone Company was organized March 29th, 1909, with Jens Jensen as president, Nels Johansson vice president, Lawrence Peterson was secretary treasurer, and Nell Sorensen and J.P. Gregerson were directors. I know a lot of you people, their names don't mean nothing, I mean. And the line belonging to Tri-State Telephone Company from Bull Lake to Luck was purchased. Both Berger telephones were bought from the company in La Crosse. Each patron bought his own batteries. The telephone directory was published in 1910 by London for $1.50 apiece. This included listings for Equity in Milltown, and 20-foot poles were purchased at 25 cents each. In 1918, they tried to get McKinley to come into the Luck area, but they went to Cumberland instead. At the annual meeting in 1922 held at the Pioneer School, the roll call of members showed a total of 41 present. In those days, a lot of people went to the meetings. Let's see, what else really got in here? Not really, not anymore.
You should tell them who made the list that you're reading, or,
Well, this is my aunt, Gertrude Peterson, that wrote this.
Was that the Gertie Peterson that was that
Did
general?
that up?
Oh,
Did she?
Yep.
how is she your aunt, Lee?
My mother's sister.
Your mother?
Past presidents of Equity were John P. Peterson, John Casperson, Andrew All, Milton Olson. I was president, Bill Nelson was president. Who else wanted? Well, yeah, damn it.
Yeah.
And a list of directors here. Here's the past operators, Silva.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, let's see that.
Yeah, one of the things that, when I read the minutes book from Luck Telephone or from Equity Telephone Company, one of the big things that one year back in in the 1910s, 20s, in there someplace, was where they were going to bank for the year, whether they were going to keep the money in the Luck Bank or it was going to be in the Cushing Bank. And there was, there was a lot of power on this thing that came from Cushing, because the books were kept by Wilson and Cushing. And,
So Wilson was the banker.
no, I don't think he was. No, he wasn't a banker. No, I don't think so.
Was Cushing more than it is now?
Oh yeah,
Well, it was at one time.
yeah. When you read some of this old history, the whole thing.
That's interesting.
If the railroad,
Yeah.
if the railroad, when it came out of Dresser, and if it would have gone up through St. Croix Falls and up through Cushing and Atlas, why, you might be surprised what Luck would have been today. We might have been Cushing today. Yeah, that railroad made a big, big difference in those days. And when they didn't get the railroad out there, where that, it was a downhill going then, I think, after that.
No, it was the same when the railroad went, through Frederick and that.
Yeah,
Clam Falls,
Clam
really,
Falls died.
yeah.
was the bigger town.
Yeah.
But, that's when things moved to Frederick.
Yeah.
What happened to Lorraine? Why did that die? McKinley. That was fairly large, what I've read about it.
At one time it was, McCurnow's had a big machinery place there, and there was, 3 grocery stores?
Yep. The Walker plant.
Is that McKinley and Lorraine the same thing?
Yeah.
Oh, they are, okay.
Well, Alabama had 3 grocery stores.
Yeah.
Alabama did?
Where's that?
Where's
West of here.
Some of these people don't know the story about Alabama. You could tell about how people from the Civil War should I tell?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, but during the Civil War, there were a lot of Southerners down there who were not with the Confederacy. And they moved out of there, not always by their own volition. And they came up here to the lake over by Cushing and settled. And that's why it was called Alabama over there.
But of course, in those days, everybody was horse and buggy. We had the same thing in Bowling Lake with the Bowling Lake store there by Howard Peterson. Because he got so mad by 1920 when cars were coming in. People didn't stop there to buy groceries, they went to Luck. Now they don't stop in Luck, they go to Minneapolis. So it's the same procedure. But Lorraine was the same deal. I mean, they sold everything out there when it was in the horse and buggy days.
Yeah, but Lorraine was going, when we first came up 46, 47 years ago now, that was quite a little thriving community.
But when the store on the south side, who the heck owned that?
South side of 48?
Yeah, there was a great big store there.
A mercantile store?
Yes, they sold anything and everything. You could buy anything in there.
Well, it was next to the Bacheloric farm.
Yeah, well, it probably was the Monchalovics that ran that. I think it was.
Probably was. Yeah.
I don't know if it's on the north side now, but maybe the old 48.
That was Colonel's on the north side.
Colonel's was on the north side. So the one that's
But that,
That's still.
that building was absolutely just demolished.
Oh,
You know, they put the highway through.
Yep.
They took that out of there.
Yeah,
Well,
It
Two
was-
Brothers
it was
had
just
stores,
a gas station.
Right.
A little
right.
confectionery store of some kind.
Yep.
Two Brothers had stores opposite each other. One sold to Indians, and the other one didn't, sold liquor to Indians, and the other one didn't agree with that, so he started a store on the other side. That's way back.
And his liquor bill increased, huh?
Wayne, how long were you on the board of the telephone company?
42 years.
And were there any really contentious issues? I'm thinking about, like, going to dial phones, was that a
No.
big deal that,
The managers had us absolutely convinced it was what the thing to do. No, I mean, no. I don't ever remember anything really.
Never was any, we never had any huge disagreements of any kind whatsoever. Sat down, discussed the thing, and that was,
Yeah.
how about going underground? That was a big expensive proposition, wasn't it?
Not
it was
really.
just the fact that it was the time that you had to get the one-party telephone service.
And it was
The
the
only way
cheapest
you-
thing to do.
Yeah, that was the way to do it. And of course, you stormproofed everything when you put it underground. Oh, it was just in order to satisfy all the people that wanted telephone service too. And of course, the other thing was that the plant that we had built in '59 wasn't near big enough. 'Cause that's just about the time, like in the early '70s, is when we got the big influx of people that moved up to the lakes around here. And every one of them wanted a telephone. We gotta have a telephone. I mean, before that, back when I first started working for the telephone company, there wasn't, well, like there was a telephone at your place there on the lake. So,
Now
another
they're all-
one at Calderwood, I think, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, but, I mean, look at all that stuff that's in between there. Before you know it, but they all want a telephone service. So there was only one way, I mean, you were gonna done it with open wires and stuff, where you had so much wires strung all over, that you had to go to buried cable where you very big cables didn't have to support them.
And I kind of miss that galvanized steel wire. I don't know where it came from, but we repaired everything with that.
Oh, yeah, but the last steel wire we used, you didn't repair anything with it, because it was stiff, it couldn't bend.
Was it just about all copper then that went under? Or?
Well, when it went under, yeah, they were all copper. Well,
Like
and of course, they're
Terry
now utilizing all of that copper that was buried back in the '70s, that's all being utilized yet today.
What about some of the easements and tracking? Wayne, maybe you're best in that, but did you have to cajole people into allowing lines across their property?
Well, that was Earl Erickson's job.
Norman Peterson.
And Norman Peterson, we hired him.
Yeah, he went out and got a lot of easements. Well, there wasn't any problem getting an easement, because you told the farmer, well, we're gonna take down all them poles, and you don't have to farm around them things anymore. But sign this, we're gonna go right down, we might run down a row of corn when we put it in, and he went back, and Norman Peterson went back, and he gave them a check for $25 or something, and they were happy. And some of them said, well, we're getting rid of the poles, we don't want nothing, just get the poles out of here, you know, so. Yeah.
Did you have to go through some pretty rough terrain?
Well, there was places where the stuff going, and swamps, and some of that stuff.
But see, now when they put in the fiber optic, then they plowed in a tube. Well, I think it's like the muskrat swamp out there. And then they pulled the wires through the tube.
So you didn't have to swim with the muskrats on there?
No. There aren't any muskrats in there anymore, but I mean, that's the title of the swamp, muskrat swamp. That's from Warren and my day.
Yeah.
Sherry was mentioning the lead, or the sample that she brought here. with the lead, when was that used for the,
Well,
when it came into the building?
that was probably the original telephone cables that were put in. There was copper wires inside.
Inside of the lead
And it was
cable?
all paper insulation and all the wires were the same color. They were just paired in there and then put in 25 pair groups with a string wrapped around that 25 pair group and another 25 pair, and I think it was a different color on each one of the 25 pair groups. That's, and then the whole thing was coated with lead. And you absolutely had to keep all moisture out of that lead, out of the paper, because the paper insulation and you got a crack in the lead, you had problems. Then you had to open it up and heat up hot paraffin, start on out both sides, force the moisture to the middle with the hot paraffin, and then the moisture, you get rid of the moisture, and you put the sleeve back over this lead cable.
So where was this, at the junction box, or at the?
We had that all the way down through East Luck here, and the alleys here and stuff like that. That old cable still laying there.
How did you keep wires straight when they were not color-coded?
Well, you had to tag each one of them. When we put all that cable in going up into East Lockaway, I worked with a cable splicer that fall, and you just there was always a tracer wire in the cable that you use that wire with the cable splicer to talk on, and then with a tone wire you could find the other pairs, and then you had some boards that were about this long. They were good for 25 pair, and so when he'd find such and such a pair, why then he'd put it in that board, and eventually when he got all the spliced 25 pairs together, why then he number one here, he twisted them, hold it like this, or cranked them around like that, and he had a snips and snipped it off. And in some cases, they soldered it, and then had a cotton sleeve they put over the outside of it.
You know, it's really interesting to me to sit here and think that I knew when there were the old crank wall ones, and I'm only not quite 80, but I keep thinking from that lead covered wire to fiber optics, what's it going to be like in another 50 years? Anybody got any ideas? You know, I can't even imagine. You know, I read science literature all the time. I can't get it in my head what's going to happen next. And I'm almost glad I'm not going to be here.
No wire. Oh, right now, I have no wire.
Scary.
No, but one of the things about is the privacy and the security of all of this airborne stuff that we're doing. That's you don't find the bank up here transmitting your bank statement over wireless. I mean, they might transmit it to you, but they're not transmitting their business over wireless. I assume they're not.
You know what a skip wave is, Warren? You know, when I was in service in the early 50s, I taught radio operation.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we were on a mountain, we'd pick up Alabama
Yeah.
on a handheld radio.
Sure.
And it would bounce off the stereo
Yeah.
and back down. And I'd be talking to this kid, and he said, I came from Minnesota. And that was the last I ever heard of it, because it was gone. And you pick up somebody else on the same frequency. It was an interesting time.
Yeah.
It really was.
Yeah.
I always thought that, boy, if they were using the type of radios I had to use in the Korean War, if they had to use those today.
Yeah.
Oh, man, we'd be making mistakes and invading countries that we weren't asked to and everything.
We at Lakeland, we've been trying to tell our customers that, you know, the value of their landline phone and landline service. I don't think that some understand, especially the younger generation. You'll see a lot of them with their cellular phones, and they don't think that they need a landline telephone. However, when you look at the security of it and so forth, it is, I mean, so valuable. Last week I read an article in USA Today that an ambulance couldn't get to someone's home because they couldn't find the home from a cellular phone. And I know I've got a scanner at home, and I hear that every once in a while where they can't find a home because of a cellular phone. And I guess if you actually take a landline phone and say, okay, I'm paying this much per month for the charge, and you get unlimited local calling, and you have your extended community calling, and put all that together, and then you look at your cell phone and say, okay, I'm paying this for 900 minutes a month, but maybe you're only using 200 minutes a month. If you kind of check them out back and forth, you're maybe coming out a lot better as far as price-wise goes on your landline. And then you've got the security of it, and you have, you know, if the tower goes down, or if you're having scratchy service in your home and can't get out, or the service just isn't good, you have your landline and you can depend on it.
Of course, nowadays we need both.
Yeah, if you're going to be traveling, you want both, but you still want to keep that landline. It's very valuable.
You didn't mention corrupt calls either.
Right.
You know, that happens in some areas all the time. And then
Yeah.
also now that a lot of us have computers, either dial-up or DSL. And I don't know if you want to say anything about this LCTV now that's just recently come.
Yeah, LCTV is a new service that we've just begun offering, and that is a TV service that is over IP, or over like an internet connection. And that's something now that we'll be able to offer to pretty much all of our subscribers. It's very exciting for us. It's brand new. We're just starting to sign people up and get people acclimated to it and so forth. But it's you know, you don't have to worry about that like you do, like if you have like Dish or something like that, that the weather maybe is going to cause a problem or something. Our system, you know, goes through our wiring, and which is underground and so forth. We've you know, kind of been going through and getting rid of all the bugs out of it right now and so forth, but we're really excited about it, and we think it's going to be an absolute wonderful service. We have offered the cable TV service. We will continue to offer that at this time, and that also has been a real good service. I know some of the questions and concerns that we've heard from people over time have been, you know, cost and price and so forth. And just one thing I think is interesting is that when we price like LCTV or our cable TV product, there's a lot that goes into it, and you know, a lot of these things we are stuck on where our prices are because of the programmers. It's something I didn't understand before I got involved with it, but if you have, you know, one channel that you want because all your subscribers want it, they'll make you take maybe 3 or 4 other channels with it. And then they're going to pay you, you got to pay for those, but they won't let you have the popular channel unless you take the other ones too. And some of the very popular channels people want, they want, you know, several dollars a month per subscriber, and they won't let you have it a la carte or anything like that. Everybody has to have it. So there's a lot of politics that go into it, but we think that we have a very good service, and it's very, very well priced for what we are giving out. We're really excited about it and think it's just a great service.
We do, we've taken the bundle,
Oh, okay.
and Chris
Yep.
has been so helpful,
Good.
and
Todd and Brandon,
Yeah.
they came over and worked some of the clinks out of it, and we
because there were clinks in it.
Yeah.
There
Oh,
was
yeah.
I picked up my land phone the other day to dial our son in Minneapolis, and I kept getting this, the plan that you have is not authorized, and I got this terrible, you know, poor service, and finally then I called Chris, and she got the technicians over there, and something just had to be repositioned or something, but, it's the TV, they straightened that out and we're getting some blocking. And
Yeah,
some
tiling and so forth, and that's stuff that's all, now being corrected,
It
and,
was correct.
you know, right now, you know, like a lot of people are just beta testers for us, but we're getting it all completed, and I think it's gonna be just an absolute wonderful service.
I told them to call Warren, but they didn't know.
I'll send my son over. He works for Sirens.